Do you know of a stellar leader or an outstanding organization that deserves a proper shout-out? Nominate them for IBJ's awards. From 40 in their 40s and Women of Influence to Nonprofit and Healthcare Excellence Awards, we're celebrating rising stars, seasoned leaders, and organizations making a difference. Discover which programs are accepting nominations now at ibj.com/nominate. When what worked stops working, I point purpose-driven leaders to Prolific, the growth firm. They turn plans into results with full-service marketing and strategy, focused on outcomes, not vanity metrics. Head to prolifichq.com to learn more.
For any young person thinking it's not your time, it's your time. It's absolutely your time. It may not be for the role that you might think of along the way, but be willing to dive in and don't wait.
Yeah.
Don't wait.
Hi, I'm Dave Neff, host of Talent Scout. On this show, we shine a light on Indiana's next generation of leaders who are making a difference in business, community, and civic life. These are real conversations about purpose, mentorship, and building a future that matters. Join me as we invest in leadership that lasts. All right, welcome back to another episode of Talent Scout with Dave Neff. My guest today is the 29th mayor of Noblesville, Mayor Chris Jensen. Welcome to the show.
What an honor to be with you. And what comfortable chairs you have for this, by the way.
IBJ,
take a nap here.
IBJ Media spares no expense.
Feltman, man, is going big.
And Mr. Feltman, Gary Dick are gracious to share this studio.
Good people.
We need to get, there's a lot of IU stuff. I think we need to get some Purdue, maybe some Butler stuff in here.
Some Butler swag would be nice.
Yeah. I know you're.
We can work on that.
We will. So, I know you're a busy man. I appreciate you being on the show. And, Chris, if I may call you Chris, I think we met.
That's the nicest name I've been called all day.
We met 4 or 5 years ago, and you were relatively new in the mayor's seat. We're started in January of 2020, right? But before we get into that, I want to go back to your childhood.
Yeah.
Where you grew up. I know you grew up in Noblesville, but talk to us what it was like growing up in your home, your family, just some of those shaping forces, those first 18 years of life.
Well, first of all, I appreciate you asking these questions because, again, I think there's so many layers to people that you should peel back, right? So I was born and raised in Noblesville, lived there my entire life. To back that up a little bit, my parents, though, were North Central grads. Okay. They graduated a year behind Mitch Daniels at North Central, and then my mom got a teaching job at Westfield High School, and so they moved to Hamilton County. They wanted to live in a different community than she taught, so they moved to the west side of Noblesville. So that's kind of what landed us in Hamilton County, which is always interesting because Noblesville really appreciates those lifers, right? And I'm a lifer, but I wasn't like my great-great-grandfather wasn't a lifer. So there's always that distinction there. So, but growing up, I was raised by a single mom. My dad was killed in a car accident when I was 15 months old.
I had no idea.
Yep.
Wow.
I'm the youngest of 3 boys. My brothers were 7, 4, and I was 15 months old. And was killed in a car accident. My parents were high school sweethearts. They graduated a semester early from IU to get married on New Year's Eve. And so I was raised by a single mom who worked 2 jobs to put all 3 of us through college. My 2 older brothers went to IU. I was that rebellious third child, had to do something different. Looked at DePaul, looked at University of Central Florida just because I could. And then my mom actually recommended one day, she had done some master's work at Butler. And she's like, let's go look at Butler. And I just, it's 20 miles from home. I didn't really even consider it. Went there, day one, fell in love with it, totally envisioned my life being there. And the rest was history. So, But no, growing up, it was great. My mom was a teacher, which was great to have a mom that was on the same schedule as we were. We had a boat on Morris Reservoir. I still have a boat on Morris Reservoir. She took us out. I always laugh like I'm sitting here like backing, the boat out, and I'm thinking about my single mom with 3 boys doing that on her own. That's incredible. So much of my life now is kind of like looking back to understand how that impacted me. Yeah. But we never were held back because of that situation. My mom tried to work tirelessly to give us every opportunity we could. My grandparents luckily lived in Carmel. I had aunts and uncles around, and that idea of a family changes when you lose a main piece of it. But so many people stepped into that void and are still in that void today for me. So yeah, we got to travel. We got to go on the boat. We got to live a great childhood. My brothers were both big athletes. I never had that. My brother at my wedding said I wasn't even good at video games, which is fine.
You gotta love older brothers,
Appreciate that, So, but it was a pretty awesome childhood in Noblesville, Indiana. So I can't say enough great things about it.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I had no idea
We're going right to the vulnerable, Dave.
about your father. No, this is great. This is what Talent Scout's about. We want the real, the go street level.
Sure.
And, your brothers, I think you said they were 3 and 6 years older. Is that?
They were 7, 4, and I was 15 months. So yes, 3. Yep.
So, did they sort of fill in that fatherly role, or were there? I know you mentioned you had grandparents, aunts and uncles, but or were there other sort of father? Like, did your mother ever remarry?
My mom never remarried.
Okay.
That was her high school sweetheart, and I think she instantly just pivoted to raising us boys. Like, that was her mission in life, right? And that's what her sole focus was. My oldest brother Matt, in particular, probably had to play very much a fatherly role for all of us. But I had uncles, we had neighbors, we lived on a cul-de-sac. My mom still lives in my childhood home, and we're kind of having that. I'm having that discussion with her about what that looks like long term. She lives in a 4-bedroom home, with stairs, and she's in her mid-70s, and so. But we had so many people that stepped into that void. And I think that is just quintessential Noblesville, and it's probably quintessential American town, right? Where people stepped in. So I never felt like I missed anything, but it certainly had an impact on how I even live my life today.
Well, that's what I don't want to camp out on this too long, but 40 years removed, and obviously you were 15 months, so I doubt you recall a ton from that specific time. But if you were to say, wow, the way you grew up, still with a ton of love in your home, but not having, a father in your home, how has that shaped you and your leadership journey? Now as a father of 4.
Yeah, as a father of 4, I've thought about this so many times, and it really took me probably till I went to college to even understand what that childhood had on my impact as an adult, right? So when I was at Butler and I was in the fraternity house, my fraternity brothers would call me Mama J every once in a while because I was always trying to just take care of everybody, make sure we're on time, make sure everyone's where they need to go. That was just kind of ingrained in me. Looking back on that and undoing the layers, it's probably being raised by a single mom that that absolutely influenced that for me. Today, now as a dad, I get to kind of rewrite the book for me, right? And I get to be what I necessarily didn't always have directly, and so it absolutely has shaped me as a dad. It's reprioritized my life. It's kind of, being a dad is the best role I get to play. I'm sure it is for you too, that I get to play every day. And I remember turning 35, 6 years ago, and that was the age my dad lost his life. And and it kind of had this moment for me of I was this age, and it kind of I'm this age, he was this age. That's crazy to think about. So it certainly has shown up in different ways as an adult.
Yeah. What was his first name?
Richard
Jensen.
So my second son, my 8-year-old, is actually Richard Harrison Jensen. He goes by Hank, but he's a Richard Jensen as well.
Wow.
So it's kind of cool.
Well, I know he'd be incredibly proud of you seeing all that you've done still at such a young age in life. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
Moving on a bit from childhood. So you're class president, right? 2002 of Noblesville High School. So clearly there were some emerging leadership traits at a big high school to step into that. Where did that sort of drive to want to run for, class president in high school?
Well, it's funny. I always enjoyed student council, student government. I'm not sure there was a pinnacle moment for me that really caused that. I always just wanted to be involved in the government process and in leadership within my class. Yeah. And I remember, and I can't remember what the slogan was. In 3rd grade, I ran for student council, won that. And I remember I think it was my junior year, I was running for class president of high school, and I was a little bit chubbier than I am today in high school, full disclosure, and I used the phrase, "I'm large and want to be in charge."
Love it.
And at first you're a little uncomfortable with that, but then it made it stuck, and I was elected class president.
Self-deprecating humor.
It does. It's like, just be humble and own who you are, right? You know what I mean? And so then I became class president my senior year as well, and then rode the trek to Butler. It's funny, I was just telling somebody the story, and it's topical. This time of year, you have a lot of kids going back to college, and I think back to my freshman year at Butler, and I remember rolling in, being like, all right, class president in Noblesville, and all of a sudden you get to Butler, and you're like, well, crap, they're all class presidents. They're all class presidents from around the country, and so that was like the great equalizer.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I want to talk about your time at Butler.
Yep.
So you don't go too far from home. You kind of move into the city from Noblesville. How did those 4 years at Butler sort of shape you and prepare you for a life in public service?
And that's, I think college is such a great opportunity to spread your wings and have responsibility. And now you have to do your laundry and all these things. And I remember my freshman year when I got to Butler, I ran for class. I decided I was going to run for class president my freshman year at Butler. And I got beat. I got beat for class president by a guy named Cliff Retyke.
Okay.
Now, you know that last name.
I do know that last name.
His brother, Brad, is a good friend of ours. Brad's younger brother, Cliff, beat me freshman year.
Wow.
Super humbling experience. Cliff's one of my best friends to this day. He's getting ready to have his 5th kid.
Okay.
He's showing off. He's in the Air Force.
Okay.
I'm sorry, he's a Marine. They all would get very offended if I missed that.
Yes,
Sorry, he's a Marine. And so that was humbling. So then you're on this new journey of like, okay, what does it look like now? And I remember my freshman year at Butler, I was a business major. I started out as a business major, and I took stupidly a 5-hour linear biology course and then a 4-hour linear math and calculus course.
Wow.
Math and science are not my strongest suit. I don't know why I chose. That's 9 credit hours of your freshman year.
Yeah.
I got, I think, a 2.8 GPA that freshman year.
Yeah.
Whoa. I mean, I remember going home and I remember Elaine Jensen, my mom, being like, listen, buddy, I'm not paying for you to Butler University to roll in a 2.8 GPA. And that was like a real tough moment for me. Again, like knocked down again. I lost this election. I'm in the crapper with grades. And I ended up rushing that freshman year and I joined Delta Delta. And that was actually one of the best things I ever did. I was super anti-Greek system. I don't know why. My brothers were Greek at IU. I was like, I'm never going to do this. I ended up doing it. It was the best thing I ever did. We had mandatory study tables if you were below a certain GPA. That, and I ended up, I think the second semester getting a 3.4. I graduated with high honors when it was all said and done. So I rallied pretty well from that. But those are those life moments, right? Yeah. And you can probably think about it in your life, like those moments that just knock you down a peg, but totally need to be knocked down a peg.
Yeah. Did you end up, after that freshman year defeat to Cliff Retyke, did it motivate you to say, okay, it's not going to be my last sort of race election? Was it kind of like, I'm done with this for a little bit? Did you end up running again as sophomore, junior, senior? What went on?
I did. I ended up running and then was class president sophomore, junior, senior year.
Oh, you did? Okay. All right.
I rallied. I got back on the horse. It's funny. I wish I could remember kind of what my thought process was. I'm sure there was not a fun feeling to lose right out of the gate as a freshman, right? And but it opened up for other opportunities, for me to go do some other things. But no, I got back on the horse, man. And it's funny. I've often thought about that in my day-to-day today because politics is very different than it was at freshman year at Butler to what I go through now. And I'm like, man, a defeat would be hard. I always admire those that can come back and plow through a defeat to get back to a victory. I mean, that's a true calling right there.
Yeah. Well, another little known fact, as I was doing some homework for this pod, I believe you had a stint as a cheerleader at Butler. Is that right? How did that come about?
Well, it's funny. That was kind of what I was alluding to there. My freshman year, I had this defeat. I was like, well, what do I do with myself now? I mean, I granted go to school and go to class and all those things. And I saw call outs they needed male cheerleader tryouts. And I was like, I've never done, athletics were not my strongest suit, full disclosure. And I was like, well, maybe I should try this. How hard could it be, right? I'd never done the athlete thing. And so I just went one day. And they had open tryouts, and I was a lifter, right? Yeah. So you're just lifting, and I ended up making it. I made the squad and did it for 2 years, and it was awesome. At freshman year, Butler made the Sweet 16. We got flown around the country to go to all these games, these basketball games. It was so fun.
That's cool.
And it really shrank my social circle then too, right? It brought me an instant group of friends who were wonderful and still friends to this day with those guys and gals that I cheered with for 2 years. But it was so fun. It is a little known fact right there. I kind of forget that I did that, but it was great. I think I lost like 40 pounds my freshman year because there were workout requirements and all this stuff. I never had to do that.
Yeah.
Wish I would have probably had done that a little earlier. Maybe go to high school a little better.
Well,
but
I'm picking up a theme, as we try to inspire certainly 20s and 30 somethings folks that might be listening to this. You seem to have been someone that's always just, you put yourself out there, right? Yeah. You're gonna whether you're qualified for it or not, running for student council, joining a fraternity, going out to be a cheerleader. Yeah. Like, is that just something like, hey, like just be a doer, just try something, may not stick, but has that been a theme in your life?
I think so. And again, if you peel back the layers, like going back to like losing my dad at a young age, I kind of viewed it as like, you only get one shot at this. You know what I mean? Like, take your shot, and you may whiff big time, what I mean? Like, and I whiffed later on in college. I wanted to go to law school. And, I took this LSAT test and I bombed it, Dave. Like, I mean, it was horrible. Got a horrible grade on it. And then I was talking to a friend of mine, Kathy Richardson, former state rep, who's now the county clerk in Noblesville, and I vividly remember her telling me, like, "Oh, I don't think you can do worse the second time. I've never heard of anybody doing worse the second time." Sure as shit, man, I can do worse the second time, and I did do worse the second time. And that was really humbling too, And then I realized, and then I was interning for Luke Kenley at the State House, and he sat me down and had this talk about, "You want to be a lawyer?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Yeah, I don't think you'd be a very good lawyer." I was like, "What?" And he was spot on. He's like, "I just think you're wired for something else. I'm not sure that's really the strongest suit, but it's like, okay, we're going to plow through that." And I'm so glad I didn't go to law school. I probably would have flunked out of law school. And that was, but again, those moments cause you to duck and weave and pivot.
Closed doors lead to other open doors. And so somebody once told me in life, you, to use a sailing analogy, you got to take what the wind gives you. Yeah. Right. And so sometimes when you've got goals and big dreams, that's great. But there's also going to be things that present itself that you would have never planned. And do you decide to walk through that door or not? So,
well, and like I always thought, like, here's my path I'm going to be on. Well, and what's the saying? Like, if you want God to laugh, tell him your plans. You know what I mean? And that's so true, right? And like, it's great to have a vision of what you think you want to do. Yeah. But you got to be prepared that vision may not work out perfectly. Yeah. And that's totally okay. And you just have to be willing to roll with it a little bit. Yeah. And if it wasn't for those rolling with the punches moments, I don't think I'd be mayor of my hometown.
Yeah. Well, this has been fascinating so far. Let's get to after Butler. So you take the LSAT a couple times, doesn't go great. How did you get this internship with State Senator Luke Kenley? Because he's, I know the name. I think if you've been around Indiana for a while, like, the guy's a legend. I don't really know Senator Kenley at all on a personal level, but I know he had a major influence on the state. So was that just happenstance? Did you know him from Noblesville? Like, how did that internship?
So he's been a Noblesville guy forever. His dad started a grocery store called Kenley Supermarkets way back in the day in Noblesville. Yeah. So it's a lifelong name in Noblesville. And then actually back in 2000, he was going to run for governor of the state of Indiana before Mitch Daniels got in the race. Yeah. So he started that journey. I was in high school, and I drove him around the state a little bit. I went to some Lincoln Day dinners with him. That was my first exposure to that. And so I knew him pretty well through that capacity. And so I applied to intern for him. He even recommended maybe I don't intern for him because that way I could get to know somebody else. Yeah. I already knew him. He was the chairman of the budget at the time, though, and chair of tax and fiscal. So I really wanted to intern. He was in leadership, intern for him. And so I did. And that was my senior year at Butler. I was down at the State House every day. It was a full-time internship. It was transformational for me to meet, and anyone who goes through the State House, whether you're an intern or if you're in LA over there in the House or Senate, opens so many doors for you. Yeah. Actually, I'm getting ready to hire a young gentleman who's an LA in the Senate right now and is looking for another opportunity, and he's going to come work for me in Noblesville. And I also, because in the Senate, the lieutenant governor serves as president of the Senate. Yeah. So I got to meet this wonderful human named Becky Skillman, who was presiding over the Senate as Mitch Daniels as lieutenant governor. And so that's what opened my door to understand. This was your senior year? My senior year at Butler. Yeah. And so actually when I didn't decide not to go to law school, or it was decided for me not to go to law school, Luke was talking to Becky. They were good friends. They were in the Senate together. She was a state senator before she was lieutenant governor. Her driver at the time, a guy named Tristan Vance, had been her driver for 2 years and was ready to get off the road. That's usually about a timeline of a driver. That's enough. And so she was looking for a new driver / body man, that guy that just goes everywhere with them. And I just thought that was like the most ideal opportunity for me. And I'm pretty sure I practically begged her for the job and got it. And got to go then on this journey that totally changed my course of fate. Yeah. And got to go to all 92 counties with her. Wow. I started 2 days before the state fair in 2002 as Secretary of Agriculture, in 2006, I'm sorry. As Secretary of Agriculture, obviously the state fair is a hugely important component to their life. We were out there every day. So I was thrown right into that. We instantly, in October that year, went to Taiwan and Vietnam on an agricultural trade mission. I went with her on that. We were only the second state post the Vietnam War to visit.
Thanks for joining us here on Talent Scout. We're going to take a quick break to hear from our sponsor, so stay tuned. Most organizations hit a point where growth stalls. The message blends in, the site stops converting, pipeline softens. That's when I tell leaders about Prolific, the growth firm for purpose-driven leaders. Through full-service marketing and strategy, They clarify the story, rebuild your go-to-market, and drive sales. Most importantly, Prolific holds itself accountable to the metrics that matter to you. If you're ready for your next growth stage, learn more about Prolific at prolifichq.com. This internship with Luke Kenley leads to this body man opportunity with Lieutenant Governor Becky Skillman. And you worked with her sort of on and off from, 06 to, did I see 2012?
Yep, 2012 when they went out of office.
That's right. So,
excuse me.
Maybe tell us what were some key just learnings. Is that what kind of you caught the bug kind of for public service from that window of time? Was it earlier than that? Just would love to learn. What did you learn from Lieutenant Governor Skillman?
Well, I always tell people in politics too, like find the good people. Excuse me. And I think about her. I think about Eric Holcomb, which we'll talk about in a little bit.
Yeah.
Susan Brooks. Find the good people and go stand by the good people. And I remember like just being, she just had this unique ability of making you feel so important every time you were with her. I remember walking one day behind Mitch Daniels and her, and at first I was amazed. They're both not very tall people, very small people. Yeah. Like these two people are in charge of the state of Indiana. But she included me in everything, right? Yeah. And she was and she treated everyone the same. When we traveled to all 92 counties, it didn't matter what your role was in life, what CEO you were doing.
Down to janitor.
Doesn't matter. Yeah. She went over and she grabbed their hand and pat their hand and asked how they were and asked their story. And she just had a unique way of making so many people across the state feel so welcome. And I learned so much through that, and she always talked about how relationships matter, and that's what got her to where she was. And, so those moments, and then I got to transition over and be director of intergovernmental affairs for her. So I got to work with mayors and county commissioners across the state who were trying to navigate state government and help them solve problems. And she just, she was a county clerk, and then a county recorder and a state senator. So she had been through the different ranks. Yeah. And so she was so good. Her office was so good about helping those individuals weave through those challenges that they were facing. So I learned so much from her, and I still learn to this day so much from her. She also I always felt like she has a unique ability where we'd be in a meeting and she'd be mad about something, which you would hardly ever know. And you had this conversation with her, and about 2 hours later, you're like, oh my gosh, she was basically telling me to like screw off in that meeting. And you didn't realize it until a couple hours later because she was just so kind about it.
She'd give you a hug at the end of it.
Yeah. And then, but later you're like, oh, she was kind of like, telling me to fly a kite at that point in time.
Wow. So. At what point did you catch the vision of like, I want to be mayor of Noblesville? Was that during that window? Was that earlier? Did that come later?
It kind of came later. I think it's funny. I was running into my classmates from Noblesville. I'd be like, "Oh, you always said you wanted to be mayor of Noblesville." Yeah. I don't remember ever saying that. Yeah. But who knows what I said as a high schooler, right? And I remember after working for Becky, I stayed on with the Pence administration for a little bit. Then I went and worked in the private sector, and I have been an advocate for a long time of young people stepping up and serving, and have been encouraging so many people to do that. And so I think when that time in Noblesville, there were some openings. There was first for the city council and then for mayor. It was kind of one of those moments where politics is like 90% timing. Yeah. You can't force it. You see it every day, people trying to force their way in. It doesn't work. Right place, right time, right vision. And it just kind of aligned naturally for me in my hometown.
Yeah. So what year did you join the Noblesville City Council or Common Council?
It's called the Common Council, Noblesville City Council. We transitioned in 2015 from a Class 3 city to a Class 2 city. What that means is you go from a 7-member city council to a 9-member city council. You also go from an elected clerk treasurer to an elected clerk and an appointed CFO. Okay. And so Noblesville had 2 open city council seats. I was back home. I had bought a house back in Noblesville, and the former mayor, John Ditzler, called me one day and he's like, hey, you live in the middle of an open city council seat. You should take a look at running for that. And I've always liked government, didn't envision myself being the candidate. Yeah. At the same time, I looked across Noblesville at the time, and it was being led by great human beings, but were mostly 60, 70-year-olds, men that were leading, and they were doing a great job at it. Yeah. But Noblesville looked a lot more like you and I. Yeah. And I was like, maybe this is an opening for me to offer a different perspective. And so I finally decided to run. Ran against 2 other individuals.
2015,
okay. And was elected. Started January 1st of 2016 on the city council. And the city council was great. Yeah. You got to be a part of the conversation. You didn't really get blamed for anything. Yeah. It's this nice, sweet little layer of government that it's actually very important in Indiana. but you get some autonomy and don't get all the focus on you.
Yeah. So you're working in the private sector for a civil engineering firm. You're serving on city council starting in 2016. You're getting a taste for what it's like back in your hometown after being at the state. So was it during that window of time, 16 to 20, where and your predecessor, Mayor Ditzler, is that right?
Yep.
You kind of caught wind maybe he wasn't going to run again. Like how did that all come about?
So it's funny.
Yeah,
he was in his 4th term in Indiana. You can run for mayor as many times as you want, and as long as you can get elected. And so he was in his 4th term. He had made it pretty clear he was probably ready to retire, and the community, I think, was transitioning enough. It was probably time for a shift in leadership. And so quickly, I mean, not hardly 5 minutes after I got elected to the city council, I think people started thinking, okay, who's the next mayor? And those cycles come around pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And honestly, like I was not interested in that. I enjoyed the private sector.
Yeah.
You had a salary in the private sector, which is great. And in the city council, I finally had the best of both worlds. I was starting to have kids.
Yeah.
And, but then, so I kind of spent like a year just but I also wanted to be a part of the discussion. I wanted to, know who was going to run and challenge them and ask questions. And so I spent about a year kind of going around talking to folks and just listening, like what do they want to see in their next mayor? It changed a lot. I had my good friend Scott Fadneston of the South. He was a 30-something. He was mayor, and then things were just changing. The dynamic was shifting in Hamilton County and in Noblesville. We had Westfield Carmel Fishers that were really, kicking the game up here a little bit. And we were just kind of coasting along a little bit. And so about a year after I was on the city council, it kind of became a little bit clearer to me that maybe it was time to step into a bigger void. And now that's a broader conversation, with my wife. And there is a lot more scrutiny with being mayor.
Yeah.
And so there's, and it's not just me. There's others that have to read it and live in it and sit in it. And so then, a couple years into it is when I kind of thought, okay, maybe I could fulfill the mission of kind of blending old Noblesville together and new Noblesville together. I was 35, but I lived in Noblesville my whole life, but I was only 35. So
real quick, how did those early, I think this is important for maybe some reluctant public servants who, maybe they're more our generation, maybe they're older, but these questions of, I think your wife's Julie, right?
Yep,
so 4 young kids, maybe not even 4 at the time. How were those early convos with your wife around, hey, babe, I'm feeling kind of like I might be called to this, or I'm really like, was she like, yeah, you're all in, or was it the opposite? Yeah.
I don't think it was the opposite. Julie Jensen has always been incredibly supportive of my journey. She's not political. I was like, and we have these friends that are in political marriages where husband and wife are super political. That would be exhausting to me. I don't know how people do that.
Yeah.
She's not. She is an educator. Although she has better political chops than she probably gives herself credit for.
Yeah.
But she's an educator. Her first focus, first and foremost, is our kids. So she was somewhat hesitant. But I tried to be as open early on about the conversation as I could. And I wanted her to chime into it, obviously, and feed into it. And I will say, ultimately, what got me, we were in Disney World with our kids, and we had just gone out for a date night at in Epcot at Canada. There's a steakhouse there. And we were sitting down, and she kind of asked me the question, like, why do you want to be the mayor? Why would you want to be the mayor? And I kind of laid it out, and we kind of talked about what the field was looking like. And at the end of it, she's the one that kind of looked at me and said, I think you have to run.
Wow.
I think you have to do it. Yeah. And she's a competitor. I will say she played high school basketball and soccer. She won the state championship in soccer. So she's the opposite of me when it comes to some of that sports stuff. Yeah. So I knew the second we got in, she would play to win, right? And so she got the competitive juices really got going, and so then we were off and running. But even to this day, her role is really she is a good grounder of me. She comes at things very differently than I do.
Yeah.
Even our politics don't align on a lot of things, and that's completely okay.
Yeah.
It's actually wonderful, and so she'll challenge me oftentimes. She always asks questions about education. She's in the literacy space now. The state of Indiana has really seen some rapid increase in our literacy rates, which is awesome. That is literally her work right now. She's with Marian University. And but it's a constant balancing act. I mean, this is not something that I don't think she will probably never be that spouse that is like, well, hell yeah. What's on the next thing? Let's go. That's just not her.
Yeah.
But she is willing to come along for the ride and have good conversation.
Well, you're clearly a high capacity leader. You've got 4 kids ranging in age from 14 down to 4. maybe for those that are like, man, like I have an interest in public service, but I'm going to wait till I'm older, kids are grown. What would be your advice, or what's like a secret sauce of living in that tension and balancing all the demands on your time?
I think that's, it's so funny because I think even early on, there are some people, and I think full disclosure, women get this way worse than us men do sometimes, is that this whole like, well, should you really be doing that right now?
Mm-hmm.
Shouldn't you be at home with the, and I think, I kind of throw a BS flag on that. Like, we can walk and chew gum as a society. I know that I can be a good mayor and fulfill my duties every day and be a really good dad and a really good husband. And I'm committed to doing that every day. Yeah. That may look different for everybody, right? And I will say, with 4 kids, you have 4 kids.
Yeah.
There is sometimes logistically impossibilities to be at 2 places at once.
Yeah.
And so sometimes, our kids might have to go to a soccer game with a neighbor.
Yeah.
And, but you know what? They know they're loved, and and that's not any, now my wife deals with the mom guilt thing a lot more than I do, but they know they're loved, and they are my first priority.
Yep.
But you have to be able to be flexible and understand that, that you may miss a thing or two here and there, but you're not missing the long game. You are there, and
you're demonstrating. I think it's important as fathers and mothers work outside the home, that work is a good thing, right? And to be excited about. There's so many people that are miserable about their day-to-day jobs and they're living for the weekend, and so to be able to model, like, I love being the mayor of Noblesville. Yeah, there's challenging days, but here's why I might miss something. And
I will say, from my seat too, they get exposed to some amazing opportunities. They're going to meet great people. I will go, I'll have a city councilman or something, and a kid will come with me. They're with me a lot, especially after hours and stuff. That's just part of, to your point, we're going to role model what it's like to serve our community, to do a job, and that's okay. And I will say my job, and you've had jobs like these, that it's not 9 to 5.
Mm-hmm.
I am the mayor, whether I'm at church on Sunday, at the grocery store, at the soccer field, baseball field. It doesn't matter.
Clock in once. Yeah.
Exactly right. And that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. And I feel like we're surrounded by a great support system who respect us. And, yes, I don't mind answering questions at the baseball field.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and that's fine. Ask it. And then I'm going to go watch my kid for a little bit and ask me something else. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's just part of who I am. And that's okay. So I don't know if there's a secret sauce except for have a spouse that is understanding, communicate as much as you can, and give yourself a little grace along the way. But for any young person thinking it's not your time, it's your time. It's absolutely your time. It may not be for the role that you might think of along the way, but like, be willing to dive in and don't wait.
Yeah.
Don't wait.
And there's a difference between being called to run and then actually winning, right? Those are 2 different things, right? So you put your best foot forward and you happen to win. And so you're riding the wave, which is great. Well, there's a lot. We haven't even got to really the Noblesville, the past 5.5 years that you've been mayor. So I want to get into a little bit of that. But you take office in January of 2020. I recall something happening a couple months after that, just like a little global pandemic.
Man.
But what was that first year like, where you're excited, you've got a vision, and then boom, we get slapped with this global pandemic. How was it? Were you regretting the decision? Were you, hey, no, like, I'm gonna adapt and we're gonna figure this out? Like, what was that first year like as mayor?
Yeah, it like COVID was the big wet blanket, right? You go flying in with such a vision. You've just come off this race. My race for mayor was a 4-way primary. First time in 16 years that race had been open. So it was a hotly contested race, and you win it, and you start putting your best foot forward, and then wham. COVID hits, and all of a sudden, but COVID in the way was like the great equalizer. No other mayor had ever mayored through a global pandemic. I vividly remember my phone ringing one day, and it was Jim Brainerd, former mayor of Carmel, longtime mayor of Carmel. He was calling to ask my opinion on something, which I was like, A, I didn't know Jim Brainerd knew who I was. B, that he'd even want my opinion. And I'm pretty sure he took the total opposite of what I told him, but that's fine. But, to me, that just reminded me, like, this is a great equalizer. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I will say that was a huge opportunity for Noblesville. Noblesville was kind of ready to pounce, right? We were a community that really had some pent-up opportunity ready to go. And I remember Matt Light, who is my deputy mayor, my right hand, the yin to my yang, is, we were sitting there talking one day, and we had all these projects lined up that we wanted to announce. And you're like, what do we do here? How do we navigate this? And he looked at me and he's like, Chris, I think we should bet on Noblesville. I think we should bet on Noblesville. And we did. And in 2020 alone, we had $150 million of private investment announced in our downtown.
Wow.
in the middle of a global pandemic.
Yeah.
So that, in a way, let us kind of shoot the gap a little bit. We got to catch up a little bit right there. And now we're at $5 billion in 5.5 years. I'm sorry, $4 billion. I don't want to lie.
Yeah.
$4 billion. I was getting carried away. Well on our way to 5. But, so that was a roller coaster. And I think that year I grew up so much. You had to, as a leader. I don't think I really realized or appreciated. I knew the politics side. I knew Noblesville side. But, now I was the CEO of a 500-person company.
Yeah.
And I've never done that before.
Annual budget of
$127 million.
Yeah.
And I'd never done that before. And some
Yeah.
people were critical when I ran
Yeah.
that I'd never been a CEO.
Yeah.
Again, I can't be who I'm not.
Yeah.
But boy, you learn a ton about, budgets and FMLA and EFMLA and all of a sudden these funding sources that are coming from the federal government and how are you investing them, what you have jurisdiction over and what you don't have jurisdiction over. Cities don't have jurisdiction over public health issues, except for maybe a few in Indiana that have health systems. So that goes through the county. So you're trying to strike this balance of, personal liberty and public health, even when you don't have a ton of jurisdiction over it. We were one of the first states to put together a grant program for small businesses on our square to keep them afloat.
Very cool.
We have 100% capacity in our downtown of small mom and pop businesses that are the backbone of our society. We were able to get them some dollars, and it wasn't big money.
Yeah.
I mean, it was $5,000 here and there, maybe.
But huge for them, yeah.
Huge for them. And it gave them the assurance to keep their lights on.
Yeah.
Right. And it kept them going. And because of that, we lost one business in downtown during COVID.
Wow.
And it was a restaurant that was already going to not make it anyways.
Yeah.
So that was incredibly telling. So we grew a lot and persevered and then that first year.
So nearly 6 years in now to being mayor, as you said, $4 billion in private investment. Yeah. And I did wear this sweater vest just for you today because I know this is your calling card.
Yep,
but you're wearing one that I haven't seen you wear before yet, but the Noblesville Boom.
Yeah.
And I know you've been talking about this, and I've driven by on 69 and seen the beautiful facility, but the Pacers G League team that moved from Fort Wayne was the Mad Ants, now the Noblesville Boom. Talk to us about that exciting development and kind of what it's part of, I think, your innovation mile in Noblesville, but kind of how you see that playing out here in the next year or two.
Well, and I will just probably draw a parallel to what I started talking about. That conversation happened because of relationships. I've known Mel Raines, who's now the CEO of Pacers Sports and Entertainment, for decades. When she was with the Super Bowl, she was with Susan Brooks. I knew Danny Lopez for years. He was with the Pacers at the time. And so they approached the city of Noblesville to kind of pitch this idea, and it's because of that. They had trust in me. They had trust in me more than just a mayor. As a person. And they came up, and it was not on our radar screen. I thought they were honestly coming. Rick Fuson was coming up to meet with me. Honestly, I thought to convince me to get my residents to go back down to Pacers games after COVID, to, kind of this resurgence. And then it quickly pivoted to this, and I was like, I didn't even see that coming. But after some time, it made a lot of sense for us to kind of embark on this. And so, we with the support of our city council and guidance from data and statistics and studies that showed that this could really make it in the community, launched an initiative to build a $93 million arena that is now open, and where the G League will play 40 days out of the year, but will be home to, volleyball games, high school volleyball games were in there last weekend. A Pink Floyd cover band is there this weekend. Vanilla Ice is playing in there in September. You're going to see corporate events in there. You're going to see bridal shows in there. It just sits as a corporate magnet right in the middle of our innovation mile. So,
well, and I think the name is fascinating because when I first heard it, there was a lot of talk about Slick Leonard and Boom Baby. But I learned that Noblesville, as a town, was founded, I believe, on a natural gas boom. Is that right?
So when the Pacers asked how much I wanted to be involved in the naming of the team, I learned a long time ago that, naming things, you're going to get 50% that hate you and 50% love you. So like, you guys go ahead and do your marketing strategy. I was insistent that Nobles will be in the name. I feel like we were bringing enough to the table that we deserve that. And we wanted to make sure we had that exposure. They went through a months-long process of interviews and research and all this stuff and came up with a name that, yes, does draw directly to Boomer and the Pacers and Slick Leonard, but does have that historical tie to Noblesville with the gas boom and as a booming community. And I think as a city that's now 201 years old, that's incredibly important to us to have that history tied into it. So I think they've nailed the name.
9th largest city now in the state, right? But you got a lot of land, room to grow.
Yeah, we're only about 60% built out. So we'll be I would think in the top 5 when it's all said and done. We'll probably top out in I would guess the 140 range in the next 20 plus years. But
How many residents now?
77,000.
Okay.
So,
and you serve as vice chair. I believe Mayor Fadness of Fisher serves as chair of CIRTA, which is the Central Indiana Regional Development Authority. What's the purpose of this group, and what impact are you seeing from the efforts?
We finally realized a couple of years ago, and we've been at it for a while, and I'll give Scott Fadness a ton of credit on this, that we realized that we have to stand together as a region to tell our region's story if we want to break through nationally and globally. We are not competing with each other in Central Indiana. Now, I would say, yes, I love to be Westfield, Carmel, Fishers, Franklin, Greenwood, whatever, beat them out for a jobs opportunity. But if a job or a company relocates to this region, it benefits all of us. So we are directly competing with Minneapolis, Denver, Columbus, Ohio, Nashville, Tennessee. Those are who we're competing with, those regions. So we've got to come together with a cohesive vision, a cohesive outlook, and that's what CIRTA is doing. We're bringing together the public sector, the private sector, the philanthropic sector to come together to tackle some big goals, and we've gotten some ready funds through the state now to launch some initiatives on our main streets all around Central Indiana. But we're going to continue to talk about, we're partnering with the Indy Chamber, Matt Mindrum and his team on a vision around kind of a marketing campaign for Central Indiana. So we are lockstep to try to move this region, which is home to 2.1 million Hoosiers. And is 40% of the state's GDP. So a major region. We're gonna march together and move it forward together.
That's great. Well, a couple personal questions as we wrap up here. You've mentioned a few names already, but maybe a mentor or two that you'd like to just show some love to, who really believed in you and sort of changed your paradigm for what's possible.
Well, I've mentioned their names already, but I would consider mom and dad are Becky Skillman and Luke Kenley. Those two are just. I talk to them, if not weekly, bi-weekly. Luke calls and I always laugh because it's always. Although lately he's called a few times to tell me that I was doing a great job, and he always is very encouraging, but he is really good about leaning in on like, hey, walk me through how you got to this decision, or what, how'd you get here? Or, hey, have you thought about like this might be a trip hazard on an issue, which is really helpful. Becky is like a mom to me. Truly, I talk to her all the time, and she is just so insightful, so kind, so supportive. And she just will always be that for me. She's just an amazing person. But, I will say Mitch Daniels, I've gotten to spend a lot of time with lately. I was always terrified of him when I worked for him. But I've gotten to know him more lately and he's great. I mean, these individuals who are older than us, Dave, this, are so willing and able to speak into us if you just ask them. And they want to help out. They are proud of the success that you're having, that I'm having. They're proud of that. So those two in particular, Susan Brooks will be another one that I just think the world of. She just has handled herself with such class. She was a strong representative for the 5th District in Indiana. I'm sure miss her. Eric Holcomb, I got to go take him Chick-fil-A a few weeks ago out to his farm in Brownsburg. So those are ones that just continue to speak into me that mean a lot, and I think love me regardless, but are willing to be truth tellers to me and push me forward.
Well, those are 5 incredible individuals, and it says a lot about who you're surrounding yourself with that's speaking into your life. Maybe I got 2 more questions here for you. What would be your best piece of advice for a young person out there listening early in their career who has a desire to get into public service?
Get into public service. Go back to your community and think about where can you serve? You don't have to run for office. There are countless boards and nonprofits that are looking for people to go volunteer their time. And I would also say, if you're looking at politics in particular, find a candidate you believe in. And there's a lot of candidates out there that you maybe don't believe in, especially right now. It's a tough time, right? Find who you believe in and go knock on doors for them. Go put in some grunt work with them. Get to know them. Drive them around. Believe in them. Come alongside them. That'll open the door. That'll so much open the door for you going forward. And I would always say too, like, no relationship is too small. I look back on my time as the aide to the lieutenant governor, and there were some people then that were so good to me then that are still to this day will support my campaign financially, Now there's some people that were not so great to me and now all of a sudden want to be friends with me, and that's a whole nother situation. But just remember, no relationship is too small. I always tell the story. I was carrying Becky Skillman's purse around. This guy named Eric Holcomb was carrying Mitch Daniels' briefcase. And look where the two of us have ended up. So you just never know. So as a young person right now, especially before you're married or have kids, you have time. Put the time in.
Never burn a bridge either.
Never burn a bridge. There are probably some worth burning down the road, but not when you're younger.
What's the future hold for Chris Jensen? Something you're looking forward to?
I think you and I were chatting before the mics went on about having a freshman, and I think that's a cool chapter in life to have older kids. I don't miss the baby phase. I don't miss that phase at all. Glad to be out of it. So I'm really looking forward to being a dad, continue to be a dad, and get to know these kids as they're more like communicative. I mean, although the freshman is like pulling teeth, but like for the most part, like all of a sudden now we start to have like more teenage problems and things that maybe they need dad for. So that's great. Noblesville has so much on the horizon. I wish I could tell you right now. I mean, we have in the next, this fall, I think you'll see some transformative announcements in Noblesville for the region and for the state. And I'm going to be bullish about that. I'm going to tell my city's story, but I want to tell our state story. Hoosiers have this unique Hoosier hospitality, this Hoosier humility, which is great. But Dave, we got to throw it out the window a little bit on the humility side. Agree. We got to tell our story, man. We have to have our foot on the gas every single day. So I love my city. I will never have a job that is more impactful than I have right now, but I love my state too. And so I'm gonna continue. I have luckily lately been able to travel a little bit around the state, back to my roots. I'm chair of AIMS, which is the Accelerating Indiana Municipalities. All the mayors across the state are members of it. I'm chair of the AIM Legislative Committee. So I've been able to travel the state and talk to legislators and learn from other mayors what's going on in their community. That's been incredibly fulfilling to me too. So I just keep looking for new opportunities to serve my community, and I'm not gonna stop.
Well, as a proud Marion County resident, you have definitely put Noblesville on notice for all of us. And I think what you're doing, and I know will continue to do, you're a bright light. The energy you bring, the clarity around your vision for your hometown. I just want you to know there's a lot of people that are in your corner, and I'm excited to see kind of whether it's Noblesville or even beyond in the future. We're pulling for you, and we need more people like you leading in the public sector in this state.
Well, thanks for the opportunity to tell my story and to tell, on a personal side too. I think it's important to understand who people are.
Absolutely.
Peel back the layers, especially in politics, understand what's underneath it all and what drives you every day. I always laugh. I give my personal cell phone out, 317-509-3134. I've always told people, just text me. Ask a question. How can I help you?
That's great.
And that's what I'm here to do. I have one shot at this.
Well, thank you for being on the show, Mayor Jensen, and excited to see what the future holds.
Thanks, Dave.
I'm Tiffany Souter, mom of four, wife, entrepreneur, and host of the Life of And podcast. For years, I built my life with brute force, a successful business, a growing family, and absolutely zero margin. I was tired, snappy, and felt constantly behind, and I was too afraid to admit it. Everything changed when I stopped trying to do more and started building systems that actually worked for my real life. If you too are craving more peace, more presence, and just more time for you, I'd love for you to join me on the Life of And. Subscribe now on your favorite podcast app or listen at ibjpodcast.com.
Do you want to know what really drives change in Indiana? You won't find it in sound bites, you'll find it in stories. Stories from CEOs, lawyers, coaches, entrepreneurs, and community advocates. That's the IBJ Media Podcast Network. Insightful, local, impactful. Find all of our shows by searching IBJ Media in your podcast app or visit ibjpodcast.com.